May I now invite our convener, Lieutenant General Patankar, to introduce our speakers for the closing session. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, after a brilliant round of 3 sessions, it's now time for the valedictory session. And I would request General Shamsher Singh Mehta to give the valedictory address. And as he's coming up to the podium, I'll use that time to briefly introduce him. General Shamsher Singh Mehta, a highly decorated soldier, a cavalry officer. I'm sure as a cavalry officer, the high point in his career was when he led the only tank column to enter Dhaka in 1971. Many years later, during Operation Parakram, he held another very prestigious appointment, that was as the Army Commander of Western Command, which was at that time very close to being an eyeball confrontation with Pakistan. During his service, he's been in various important appointments. He was a military assistant to General Sundarji, who's credited with changing the thinking within the army. He was the one person who started the army on the track of looking at mobile thinking. Not only mobile warfare, but forward thinking, mobile thinking. And I'm sure General Mehta had something to do with that also. He's been very active during the later part of his career also. He was the Deputy Chief of the Army Staff when he was my boss, and I learned a great deal during that period. But after retirement, he's been a principal advisor to the Confederation of Indian Industry, CII, from 2004 till later he became the Director General of that same organization from 2006 to 2008. He conceptualized and launched the Skill India initiative in CII, which has facilitated India's entry into World Skills International, and he was also a member of the National Security Advisory Board from 2004 to 2006. He is on the board of Indian Council of World Affairs, a trustee of the Tribune Trust, and has served as the service member of the National Task Force on Information Technology. He was also a member of the Group of Ministers Task Force on the review of defense management. I'm tempted to add one more line to his very illustrious career. He's always been, like I said, I served under his leadership when he was the deputy chief, and I found him to be always a step ahead in thinking, the whole thing, the process of his thinking. Even before in India we started even realizing that there is a thing called 5G, I heard him advocating about starting research and development to stay ahead of the curve in 6G. So here, we still haven't started even talking about 6G. He talked about it a few years earlier. And his whole idea, the thinking ahead part that I mentioned, was to stay ahead of the curve of technological development. General Mehta.
Thank you. Dr. Mashelkar, Vijay Kelkar, distinguished panelists and guests who come from outside, some of whom I know personally and some of whom I had a first chance to meet here. I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to see the type of churning that is taking place in our thinking. And for somebody who's now getting close to being 80, it's a great idea. Let me make a few points related to a couple of things that I heard, Some may be linked, some may not be linked. But it is important for us in this theme, India's security in a challenging world order, to first have a good look at where the world order is. And I'm not going to take more than 20 seconds to explain that. If you look at what is happening in the global press, what the world is saying is, US is weakening, Russia is exhausting, China is threatening, Pacific is refurbishing, Latin America is moving left, Global South, including Africa, is standing up, neighborhood is collapsing, social unrest is cantering, trade, tariff have become weaponized, the character of war is changing, it is no more only kinetic, it is now kinetic and non-kinetic. Whichever part of the world you look at, all this is happening. Associations are changing. You have a thing called the Abrams Accord. You have a U2I2. You have a Accord. You have so many else things happening. So definitely, there is a changing world order about there is no dispute. But in this changing world order, where do we find ourselves and where do we need to find ourselves is critical. In a corporate balance sheet, there's very good sense about first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. If you look at our span of 100 years, 75 years gone by, we are now in the fourth quarter. And the fourth quarter has a great habit of looking at profit and loss. So let us see what are we going to be able to do over the next 25 years so that our balance sheet in relation to the progeny and the people we leave behind is worthy of the investment that all of us have made. What should it look like? It is something that we may consider or we may begin to consider. But in my humble view, some things stand out. And the first thing that stands out to me in the last couple of years is whether we were NAM 1 or NAM 2 or aligned or non-aligned or we were speaking with tongue-in-cheek, I'm delighted to feel at my young age that now India seems to be standing up. And my humble submission to all of you who will carry India forward is, now that we have stood up, we have no business to sit down. And I'll talk about stand up a little later. Number two, have no doubt in your mind, at least the way I see it, that China is an enemy state. If you begin to hedge and haw that you might compromise, we might deal with him here, we might deal with him there, it will always be from a position of weakness. Whenever you're talking to them, whenever you're dealing with them, must begin to understand that they don't mean well by you. You do not figure in Xi's calculation of a Chinese century. You do not figure in his calculations of China, which must find its place in the world after having 100 years of lost oblivion when others were ruling them. You don't matter. The only people who matter to you are you yourself, and now that you have stood up, you cannot afford to sit down. And if you are therefore looking at the last quarter, much of people have said in the morning, some more will be discussed, some of you will discuss amongst yourselves. The thing that is standing out is that today you may not be in a position to take this posture of China, but you have a quarter of a century, and all of it may not be in your hand. Prepare for peace. Preserve the peace, but prepare for war. It will come unannounced. It came to Ukraine unannounced. Every think tank in the world never assumed the situation that is happening in Russia, Ukraine today. Every think tank said, they'll do this much, they'll not go. Every think tank in the world said nuclear lexicon does not talk of threat. When in the first Gulf War, Israel was threatening Saddam Hussein that if you scud me, I will nuke you. The Americans flew out Eagleburger, made him land and sit in Tel Aviv, gave them $4 billion, gave them 22 batteries of Patriot and said, you will not use threat of nuclear, because threat of use is first use. If you threaten me that I will use it and I don't do that action, you have used it. There's time to look at nuclear now that there's a superpower, which is P5, which is the leader of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Whether he's using the word nuclear or not, there's threat of use. So which lexicon, which grammar in which you and I have been brought out in the first 3/4 of our life, everything is changing. Don't see the world changing only in relation to A, B, C, D. Everything is changing. And we have to stand up to be counted. And therefore, we need to set our stage for our long game. Democracies have great difficulties in having a long game. Democracies have great difficulty in understanding a long game because whatever is happening in America today, everybody thought they'll go red, but nobody went red. Or they didn't go red as much as they thought. Similarly, there is some sense in democracies which comes with an inner strength to people that when threat is visible and announced and particularly articulated well, people galvanize to become together. And when they got together, they are unbeatable. Take 1971. Sorry to give that example. I've mentioned that so many times. In 1971, out of 160 countries then in the United Nations, only 2 countries voted for us. I think one was Poland and I think the other was Somalia. Everybody was against us. When we went in for humanitarian intervention, nobody wanted to support us. Nixon and Kissinger were worrying about their bread basket from Pakistan getting onto China. Nobody was supporting us. So it's the wisdom of the Indian people, it is the wisdom of the people who led India then, and equivalents of them are leading India today. The lesson that comes out of 71 is what we should never forget as a generation is invincible India is the incredible India whenever we are Team India. If we work in silos and we don't work together and we say, this is your job, this is not my job, what Tara was saying in the morning, we'll never be able to get our act together. And democracies have a great facility to be able to do it together because there are no inimical interests. If there's one lesson you must take out of 1971, it is this. And the second lesson, where India should lead the initiative to our regional neighbors, is that it was not a victory only of the Indian people. 1971 was the victory of democracy over military rule. Democracies will always win. Although they're open to subversion, although they're open to vociferous tendencies, but when they put their act together, democracies are unbeatable. With that, let me make a couple of points. When we look at the world order today, my humble view is that today we stand on the cusp of what I call a grand strategy moment. It is time for India to look at its own grand strategy. We didn't ask for it. This has come in our lap because whatever else has happened in the world. And what has happened in the world? Something that has been repeated. Dr. Mashelkar mentioned it. Somebody else mentioned it. The world has for the first time realized that COVID, conflict, and climate change, irrespective of which part of the world you are in, will impact everybody. So when we look at these occurrences in the emerging global order, and everybody is going to get impacted, then there is a feeling or a notion that everybody has to put together to say, should we allow this to be a Chinese century? Should we allow this to be an American century? Should we allow this to be an Asian century? I think we shouldn't allow any of the 3 things. You and I have a role to perform as 1.3 billion Indians, 20% of the world's population, the most densely populated country in the world, the largest democracy in the world, to make sure that it is now a global century. Wherever we put our hat into the ring, it should be to make a global century. Will it happen? I don't know. Look at the chance that you have on your feet. It is this year that you have become the leader of the world in G20. The leadership will ring right through Indian cities and towns and in the next 20, 30, in 1 year. The moment you articulate the position, and why is it that we can talk about a global century? Because your Prime Minister said only a few days ago that we are a status quo power. Your Raksha Mantri said only a few days ago that nuclear weapons are not for use. Look at our track record in nuclear weapons. We kept saying that nukes is a bad idea. We kept saying till everybody said, no, nukes is a good idea for power. The Prime Minister Indira Gandhi went for a peaceful nuclear explosion to tell the world, listen, don't talk too much about it. We can do something about it. Yet, nobody listened. A little later, India began to realize, I think it's the political class and the executive and the bureaucrats who run the country, that nuclear weapons are now become a currency of national power. If you don't have that power, the other thing, nobody will. India ke baare mein kya sochna hai yaar? The same thing happened to us in 1971 because they said, yeah, it's India, Bangladesh war apne aap theek ho jayega. When two skeletons fight each other, nobody wins. That was the lexicon and grammar in the local population of that time. When we realized that nuclear weapons have now become a global currency, we went in for Pokhran. We took the flag that comes with it. But please understand, and please articulate, and please say that again and again, from the time we did not have nuclear weapons, till the time we become a nuclear power, our stance has not changed. Nuclear weapons are not for war fighting. No first use. If this doesn't allow you to occupy a leadership position in this changing global order, then I know what will. It is not because you and I are standing together in a classroom and talking about, okay, all right, let's lead the world. No. In the last 75 years, we have done many things. Our country, our government, our people, whichever political party was in power, by slowly and steadily you're raising your bid to such a level where you're being able to tell the world that we walk our talk. That is why when somebody talked of tactical nuclear weapons, we say we don't draw any distinction. Nuclear weapons are not for war fighting. And so Narasimhan made that point. You cannot have red lines. The moment you say, I have a red line against corruption, that means you accept some part of corruption which doesn't cross your red line. You can't have two red lines. The red line is that you can't use a nuclear weapon, period. Whether I then knock the head of you, your country, your city, that's my business. That is not an option that you can exercise on my behalf. That's an option I will exercise on my own behalf because I have no red lines. Other than one that we have said. Even China says, no first use against those who do not have nuclear weapons. We don't talk of that. Our moral position in the last 75 years, that is why we are a thriving, shouting, argumentative, non-communicative, but we are a great democracy in which I take great pride. And when I say I don't mean I as an I, but all of us. When you go and talk anywhere in the world, what are we talking about? We don't do this, we don't do that. Unfortunately, for some reason, and that is again something to do with our culture, that by nature we are not an aggressive people. By nature, we are people who accept the status quo, accept the other man's position, and begin to absorb it. Let me just move on to the point I want to make next. And therefore, in this G20, when our Prime Minister is going to talk, and they talked a lovely thing that already happened, this is the time for us to be able to articulate to the world through forums like this and in many other forums in India, that the future of the world, if it is going to be a global world, global order, at the global level, it is only going to be based on development, dialogue, and discussion. If these things fail, then obviously the next step will take place. And this is what we need to pursue, and I think we are capable of pursuing. Somebody said over 100 years ago that the best foreign policy of a country is dependent upon how its internal governance is. if your internal governance is class 1, it's an automatic foreign policy. Every diplomat goes out and talks about internal governance being the basis of what he's telling the rest of the world. So whether it's internal governance which comes out of police reform, whether it's internal governance which comes out of ABCD has not happened, internal governance is critical to ensuring that you have an outstanding foreign policy which is credible in a world wherever you talk about it. Therefore, if the police has not been reformed, the services are not doing their job, silos are not talking to each other, that is all part of internal governance. And therefore, the ability to be able to do that is to be able to tell the story in a level at a story why all of us have to break our silos and get outside the silos and talk. There was a lovely exposition by, last evening, by, I forget his name. Sanjay Baru. He talked about 20 years ago, talking about expenditure and economic development is a great idea. I have no argument with that. In fact, it's a beautiful presentation, very well articulated, very well presented. However, I have a bone to pick with it. And my bone is that if economics and the treasury will decide security, and if you really want to have economic growth, why is it difficult for us to be able to put it in words which are more palatable to people who do the allocation of the budget? Now let me make a statement. Affordable defense expenditure is an engine of economic growth. Whether you give me 1%, whether you give me 1.5% of GDP, whether you give me 3%, why is it an engine of economic growth? Because it does three things for you. First, it makes you feel secure. Second, there's a human resource development that takes place pan-India. And the third, which is critical, is that if it is well utilized and if it is within affordable limits, then you make sure it is exchanged for technology which comes to your country as dual use. The tragedy about us, and I am saying that with some conviction, but not all the conviction that I should have, that, and I'm sorry to say if anybody is going to get offended by that, we are a trading community. We have not been able to convert trade into a national asset in relation to where we become self-reliant. Can any one of you tell me, and I've given this before to this audience within the PIC, we are going to be the largest users of domestic lift because of our size. I had to go and put a lift in my house. I lost my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, I have a two-storied, so put up a lift. I went through 200 of them. Nearly all 200 are made in India. But not a single lift's critical component is made in India. And my question, therefore, to corporate India is, where is your animal spirit? Why don't you go and spend the money to buy the critical component and say, unless you give me this, no autos in India? We don't do it. That is where India will come first. That is where India needs to come first. And somebody talk of technology, I'll come back to that later. The animal spirit is not in trading. The animal spirit is saying, I'm making $100 extra than I make every year. I am going to spend 70 rupees in doing research in something which I can begin to do myself tomorrow. The moment you're not doing it yourself, you'll be on somebody else's feet. We saw that what happened in the COVID. Great pharma world of the world, but on API we're dependent on China. You cannot make a paracetamol in India because the API comes from China. So what are we feeling great about? The last quarter of this century, each one of you has to spend enough time to see what am I adding to India? What am I adding to my bottom line? What have I missed from adding to my bottom line? What is it that I need to do? Yes, money in the bank, money as corporate, money as benefit is always available. But what are you going to do with it? The next, so all this can still be a hogwash. I mean, everybody comes and everybody stays. So I was just thinking to my mind, and I mentioned that 3-4 weeks ago, even in the same hall, that if we are going to actually move to 2047, it is possible for us, so all the dialogue that took place in the morning here, to be able to translate that into some sort of a national vision. Then if the national vision, plus minus, you can cut off one word here and put one word there. It is important for us to be able to have a national vision by which everybody can then begin to operate and no part of the world begins to get threatened simply because we're a status quo power. So, with great humility, I'm one of those guys who believes that power corrupts, but PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. So I don't use a PowerPoint, but I will take the liberty of flashing a slide because I will not be able to read it out as well. Are you going to put that up, please? And I'll read it out for you. India should be and be seen as a confident, democratic, multicultural, non-domination nation, which is strong militarily and economically, 8% GDP. Ideologically committed to the principles of democracy, which everybody knows, enmeshed in our constitution, and among the first-ranked powers in the world in science and technology. Ajay was making a lovely point this morning. What is a military-industrial complex? Eisenhower said it's a bad idea. Of course it's a bad idea because he was Eisenhower. If you don't have a military-industrial complex, you will not have a standard, you will not build to it, you will not be secure, you will start importing weapons. If you import weapons, you will not do research. If you don't do research, you will not do education. If you don't do education, your education will be where it is today. We now have a great document called, I don't know what it's called, NMPP, National NMPP? Yeah, NMPP. But nobody is telling us how to do it. Kahan start karoge? There's no paper that tells you how to do it. I happen to be, in my personal capacity, looking after a couple of public schools. We look at the document every day. Okay. It should be an independent international force to reckon within a multipolar world. And I'm not willing to accept Narasimha's idea that we're not going to be a multipolar world shortly. Why not? 1.3 billion Indians. And do you know, 1.3 billion Indians, and this is an anecdote I must tell you, in fact, two of them. I had a chance when I was doing the US Army War College course to speak to the great CEO of General Electric, I think Jack Welch. A speaker is normally allowed in the foreign courses to come and sit with you and have lunch with you. So we were having lunch together. And he said, I've just come back from India, but I notice that you guys are very upset with your political system. I said, what happened? No, you think your politicians are corrupt. He said, General, let me tell you, our chaps are more corrupt. Jack Welch. So I said, this can't give you happiness? He said, no. What gives me happiness is when our guys are bought, they stay bought. They're not immediately available for a rechange. I said, fine. Then I went for the World Economic Forum. And one of them wanted us, 6 of us, to join him for dinner, and I joined them. I mean, India is invited to all these forums. And I'm a non-drinking Indian with 51 years in the army, 41 years in the army, but I don't drink. So I was very happy to join them because I know that in a drinking gathering, truth comes out in the 4th or the 5th drink. So I always wait for that. So this chap had a drink. Why don't you have a drink? Why don't you have a snack? We had a snack, this, that. When he got onto the 4th, 5th drink, he said, General, who the hell told you you're independent? I said, we got independence in 1947. He said, are you sure? I said, what's the doubt? He says, no. I'm putting it in a different context. Do you know I run a colony in your country? I said, what do you mean? I have 100,000 guys working for me in Bangalore. You have no ability to exploit them. As far as I'm concerned, they are my colony. I tell them what to do. They do what I want them to do. I get it done at 1/3 the price. They're enjoying, I'm enjoying, and making money hand over fist. When will you get your act together to use these people as your strength? I had no answer. No answer. He was right. I don't mean to say he was right that we are a colony, but please understand that it is our talent which is making the world competitive. It is our talent that, sorry, second time. It is our talent which is making the the world go to prices that are not affordable to us after our guys have produced it. He says, tell a chap to make I tell somebody to make an aileron of an aircraft. Now, I only give him the drawing. He doesn't know where it's going to be fitted. वो बना के दे देता है, मैं जहाज में लगा देता हूँ. So please understand that our talent is incomparable. The diligence of our children is incomparable. And I often give this example when I speak to my children and grandchildren. And I have 4 grandchildren. That I say, listen, I belong to a generation of goalkeepers. I was a goalkeeper. What our goalkeepers do? They don't allow a goal to get scored. If a goal is about to be scored, we'll call back the centre forward कि यार goal मत होने दो. And if a match was a draw, we felt very happy कि match draw हो गया. जीतने का मुद्दा नहीं है हमारे में. और हमारा problem क्या है? I'm talking about my problem, not necessarily your problem. That our young generation are all centre forwards. They want to score. But we hold them back. Our children are changing their jobs. Some of them once every day and twice on Sundays, but some more frequently. We don't even know, and they don't tell us because we will say, अरे जॉब बदली कर दिया तो क्या होगा, माँ का क्या होगा, बाप का क्या होगा, पेंशन का क्या होगा, वो बताते ही नहीं अभी हमको. But what our children are forgetting, and I'm addressing the people sitting right at the back, is there's a great value of goalkeepers. They are people who could bond people together. You don't know how to bond. You only know how to score. You're also waiting for a pass, and we are not letting you go. Our responsibility to let you go, and your responsibility to have the resolve to be able to not lose bonding. Because the world has now come back to say, if there is no family, you see what happened to the world in COVID. You see what happened in India in COVID. Hundreds and billions have died and continue to die in China today because it's a one-child norm. Nobody is telling Chinese that your one-child norm is not allowing your COVID to go away from China. The basic unit of society in India is a family. The basic unit of society abroad is an individual. The strength of families is what my generation gave you. Don't lose it. But don't take away your initiative of being a center forward, because then the world is capturable. Then the 4th quarter is going to be a quarter of profit. Don't forget that. Strategic autonomy. Ambassador Misri made a wonderful point. I think we have no question, but we have to be strategically autonomous. Strategic autonomy does not mean this camp or that camp. What is best for my country is my position on strategic autonomy. And I'm so glad to tell that our people now in the foreign service and even within some think tanks are beginning to tell the world, listen, just because Russia is fighting Iraq, I cannot impoverish my own people in relation to energy. How can I do it? What am I going to add to the world? How am I going to add to the world? Look at the global south. They have no food, they have no fertilizer. And India is still a rising economy in this period, so we are now standing up. We just have to remain standing. We have to understand the meaning of strategic autonomy and not bring it into a narrow sense. But the world is one. That's what the Prime Minister said at the G20. It may have looked at something which looks very esoteric as far as the world is concerned, but you and I have been brought up in the understanding of that. I am a little, not worried, but a little excited about when we talk of fronts and fronts of war. And there was some discussion in the morning. There is no question that there are fronts. And there was a question raised about how should we look at Pakistan. I must give you an anecdote right up to the end. 1 year before my retirement, I had to visit America for armies go to each other. I was Western Army commander. And I was in a meeting with the Vice Chief of the American Army. So he had something to discuss with me, and they normally put out an agenda. But he put the agenda away, he put his specs away. He said, General, what do you think of Musharraf? So I said, yeah, we come to discuss the agenda, Indian Army. I said, General, I don't think of Musharraf. He said, what? I said, I don't think of Musharraf. You've got hold of an idiot. You put him on a pedestal. You worship him every morning because you want something out of him. 10 years down the road, he'll let you down. The trouble is that you don't know how to see it. The trouble is that I'm seeing it and I'm telling you, I don't think of Musharraf. to his credit, 10 years later, he made a message conveyed to me, General, you were right. When the chap did a coup and he did this and he did that and ABCD, this, that, and the other. The trouble with us is that you and I, have the great facility born through our DNA that we have the ability to see an action and then see the second, third, and fourth order effects of that action. That is what wisdom came to the genes that we have inherited. And we use it in a normal parlance. नहीं ये नहीं कहोगे, नहीं इसकी शादी उसके साथ नहीं होगी, वो उसके साथ नहीं चलेगी, तो we do that in a daily parlance. And at the same time, therefore, we develop an ability to be able to see the second, third, and fourth order effects of what we do. Unfortunately, some of the world, which is in a great hurry to perform, is not in a position to see that. And it's a fact. Therefore, the fronts, if you were to ask me, I'm a former Western Army commander, we were about to blow each other up. If you were to ask me how to look at Pakistan, my simple, single commitment to you was, don't talk of Pakistan. A country 1/4 my size, 1/6 my army, 1/10 my air force, 1/9 my navy. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? If he's sending terrorists, we'll handle them. But where is the threat? Whenever I tell my army colleagues, and the Southern Army commander is sitting here, we used to have a thing called a ditch cum band. Ditch cum band is a defensive position you occupy 20 kilometers inside your border in case the enemy comes. I said, demolish them. What courage has a man across the fence got to come across the international border? All he can come across is what is contested. No? And if he comes across what is contested, you know what to do with him. So if I was you, I would not talk of Pakistan. If I was you, I would talk of China once every day and twice on Sundays. But this guy is a growing giant. He's become expansionist. He's become interventionist. He's got problems in Taiwan, South China Sea, Mongolia, India, Tibet, Uyghurs, now a bit of Russia. Now it's happening, whatever is happening in Russia. And since I use the word Russia, let me just give you one point that I've not heard anybody talk about. Russia, unlike any other part of the world, runs off 11 time zones. Second, the width of Russia, I repeat, the width of Russia is 3 times the length of India. Can you imagine Kashmir to Kanyakumari 3 times over? It has got a non-replaceable population in Siberia. 77% of the Russians live on the west of the Urals. Chinese are not just doing it for nothing. I don't know what they're doing it for. I don't even have any intention of what they're doing. Well, I don't understand what they're doing. But please understand, this is what you're talking about. And while we are the most densely populated country in the world as a democracy, I'm not talking about Singapore, which is 10 times ours, it's a city-state. I'm not talking about Macau and a couple of islands. We are the most densely, we are 431 per square kilometer. And therefore, if conflict apart, if climate change takes place, where will people come to from Bangladesh? Where will they go to from Sri Lanka? Where will they go to from other areas around us? It's an area that impacts us. We have to be worried about it. And even in this 431 in square kilometers, we have parts of India which are less densely populated than the others. And the northeast is less densely populated than the rest. And look at India very carefully. We talk to development and growth. You draw a vertical from Allahabad, it goes down to the west of Chennai, because India, peninsular India moves in that direction. We have 8 metros in the country. 7 are west of this line. The only metro east of this line is Calcutta. Equitable development, equitable growth. And what was the Naxal belt? The line that divides the two. It is not an external problem, it is an internal problem. And therefore, looking at ourselves more seriously, looking at our governance more seriously, setting out a standard in that seriously is your best policy to represent India, because we have to make the fourth quarter pay for us in a profit and loss statement. The world has to stand up and understand who we are, where we are, what do we do. Our talent is just enormous. Just enormous. And then a couple of other points. And this relates to this business of, because it's linked to security. We are talking of the Chief of Defense Staff and theaterization. I feel a little pained to be able to tell you that when you look at theaterization, we have been looking at theaterization in relation to what is the existing thing available and how can I cut it into theaters. Bad idea. When you look at theaterization, it is a bigger step in taking care of a two-front war. And therefore, when you look at theaterization, you must look at what are the areas that concern you in relation to national security, when it happens in your neighborhood and when it doesn't happen in your neighborhood. Put a map of India in your mind and take your mind to the Pamir Knot, which is northwest of the corner of India. From the Pamir Knot to the Malacca Straits is a diagonal. If you convert this into a rhombus, that is the area where we are concerned about. So when you look at theaters, for God's sake, how will you be in a position to handle these theaters? You may make one today, you make two tomorrow, you make three tomorrow. I think you will need 5 to 7 theaters to handle this. Otherwise, in 2047, you will not be a pole. When you look at the west coast of India and you talk of Indian Ocean, there are 38 nations to deal with. When you look at the east coast of the maritime world, and somebody talked about maritime being greater now, there are another 30, 40 countries in the Indo-Pacific world. You're going to deal with them. So how many theaters we want is not something that I can discuss or should discuss here. It's not my business. I'm out of the service. But when you look at theaters, please do not look at existing assets and how you divide them. If you handle a two-front situation, please look at theaters as theaters in which you will be able to do A, B, C, D, whatever you decide to do. But that is something that you will take care of. And when you do that, automatically, once the theaters are in place, jointness will follow, transformation will follow, and that is something that you will obviously take care of. Two things before I finish, and I'm sorry, I would have short my time, but Pat, please excuse me if I've done that. That the greatest missing link, as I see in my service life, is that we have never been, perhaps not so profoundly stated as I'm going to state it now, we have to build on our self-esteem. A common man can only have self-esteem if there is food in the stomach. When a country is full of a population which has got self-esteem, it requires no guns, no tanks, no aircrafts, no maritime. It will look after itself. Self-esteem is not a pious word which you eat every morning in the church and say, I'm done for today. No. Therefore, inclusivity, the ability to be able to share, the ability to be able to give, the ability to be able to see how every part grows. So when I talk of leadership of the world in G20, what are we talking about? Here is a country which is PL40 said you will die hungry. We produced a green revolution. We produced a white revolution. We produced an IT revolution. We are now into a millet revolution. We are now into a digital revolution. What are we not doing? I don't want anybody to get out of this room to ever feel that we are second to anybody else in the world. I'm not saying it's a sense of arrogance. I'm saying this as what you are and what you have brought into your DNA. And the ability to be espouse that in a manner which is not non-threatening. We have no intention on anybody else's territory. We don't do it. We did in 65, whatever we captured, we gave it away. We did in 71, whatever we captured, we gave it away. In 3 months' time, we left Bangladesh and came back. We were not occupiers. Like it happened after the Second World War. If all that is our strength, and despite the misgivings and things that they're missing or not missing or happening or not happening, we are an unstoppable country. We are an incredible country. We are an invincible country as long as we remain Team India. Thank you and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. That very inspirational and probably no better way to round out today's proceedings. At the very end, I'm going to request our Vice President to give his concluding remarks. And before he does that, let me introduce him to you. Dr. Vijay Kelkar, who's our Vice President. He's a PhD from University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Kelkar joined the Planning Commission in 1973 and thereafter the Commerce Ministry in 1977 as economic advisor, and has since then served in various posts, including Secretary to the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister from 1985 to 1988. In 1994, he served as Petroleum Secretary and was made Finance Secretary in 1998. He was an Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, overseeing its operations in South Asia during 2000-2002. Dr. Kelkar has retired as Chairman Finance Commission in the rank of Union Cabinet Minister. He has held several other key positions in the Government of India, amongst them Advisor to the Minister of Finance, Finance Secretary, Chairman, Tariff Commission, and Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. He was elected as the Chairman of the Forum of Federations, Ottawa, Canada, from 2010 to 2013. In January 2011, the President of India awarded to Dr. Vijay Kelkar Padma Vibhushan, the second highest civilian award in our country. And you know that that award is given for distinguished and exceptional service to the nation. He's currently, and I'm very proud to say, our Vice President at the Pune International Center. May I request him to give his concluding remarks now.
General Mehta, General Patankar, our President, Dr. Mashilkar, and distinguished participants. I am very grateful to General Patankar for a very generous introduction. My regret is that my wife is not here, so she could have heard it. It probably would have improved our domestic politics. Speaking after a very eloquent address of General Mehta is like asking someone to sing after Bhimsen Joshi's rendering his classic singing. So it's very difficult to speak after General Mehta. I'm going to make only 2 or 3 remarks, and this is essentially about PDNS, how it's evolving, and how we are going to take it forward. Thanks to General Patankar's leadership, I think you'll agree that this was probably one of the best PDNS we had in the last 7 years. And it was because of our partners. I don't see Mr. Haldar or Mr. Singh of Policy Perspective Foundation, and also Air Marshal Gokhale, who is from Center of Advanced Studies. But because of our 2 partners, I think this program of ours has gathering, I think, some traction and momentum. So today during discussion during lunchtime with Dr. Mashelkar and Ambassador Bambawale and some other colleagues, it was felt that we should now involve, as a natural extension of these efforts of improving our own and public and general understanding of the India's challenges, we should involve Indian industry a little more purposeful manner. So probably what we are proposing now, General Mehta, is that we will have a follow-up session on national security with involving Indian industry, so that it's essentially message goes much more wide. So this is what we're proposing to do, and that's what probably we'll do in the next 6 months or so. This particular conference, we started with Dr. Mashelkar's remarks, and in which he evoked the VUCA world, and the concluding remarks of General Mehta, which were very wide-ranging, but he also came back to almost similar kind of world and what we should do. I think I personally gained a lot. I personally gained from every session. I learned a lot. And it was really, I found the quality of discussion, and I'm sorry to see that our only Dr. Tara Kanta is not here. I think we have to improve our composition, because looking at Tara, if there are more Taras, I think it would have been much better and higher quality. So I think we must improve our participants. We should have more Tara Kanta here, so that our improvement takes place. And that's also a challenge we should take for our next conference. The last point I wanted to make was this, churning or manthan, which is the logo of our Pune International Center. Lots of good ideas have come. I think my colleagues are taking, I'm sure, careful notes, and we will probably bring out within a few weeks a document which will summarize the wisdom of this conference. So with these very brief remarks, really I want to thank each one of you for your very, very active participation. I want to thank all the participants, all the panelists. Some of them traveled from different places, and their contribution has been extremely valuable. And with these brief remarks, I hand over to baton to General Patilkar.
As a small token of our appreciation, I'm going to request the participants of today's proceedings to kindly accept a small gift on behalf of the three organizations, that PIC, PPF, and CAS. I'm going to sound out the names, and I'll request each one of you to please step up and accept a small gift from us. Please. May I start with Ambassador Misri? The gift consists of a book published by the Pune International Center on China, Rising to the China Challenge.
But you like the title of this book, Rising to the China Challenge, Winning for Strategic.
In fact, half the authors of this book are now present here in amongst us, starting with Ambassador Bambawale, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Dr. Mashelkar, and the other three are out of station, so they are not here today. The next name I'm going to announce is Mr. Pradyot Haldar, but I don't see him here. So, all right. May I request Mr. Gurbachan Jagat to please come and accept. Yeah. Dr. Ajay Sahni? Oh, he's also left, maybe. Mr. Gopal Pillai? Oh, he's also gone. We have to ask these airlines to delay their flights for at least an hour. General Shokin Chauhan? I'm sure he's not catching any flight, but...
But he has gone.
All right. Professor Kondapalli, are you here? All right. I think Air Marshal Gokhale is not here too. Otherwise, he has some say with the goings-on at the airport, our local airport. I have to ask him to throw his rank around and tell all the airlines to reschedule their flights. Dr. Tara Kartha is also not here. I think she is packing her bag, I'm told. But certainly I do see Mr. Umranikar. Yeah. Ambassador Raghavan? And last but not the least, certainly, is General Narasimhan. I forgot my close friend, Nitin Gokhale. How could I do that?
The journalists are always known for the last word, so that's why. They have the last word.
No, exactly. That's the point I was going to say. Journalists always have the last word. It only remains for me to thank Dr. Kelkar and General Mehta. Thank you very much, sir. I'll be requesting now our director to give the vote of thanks. Thank you. The very last item on our agenda is the vote of thanks, which will be given by Mr. Abhay Vaidya, our director.
Thank you very much, General Patankar. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as they say, all good things must come to an end, and this brings to close the 7th Pune Dialogue on National Security, leaving all of us, I'm sure, with new insights, new perspectives, and a lot to think about on the issues discussed. On behalf of Pune International Center, PPF Policy Perspectives Forum New Delhi, and CAS, Center for Advanced Strategic Studies Pune, I am honored to present this vote of thanks. I wish to express our gratitude towards each and every one of you who has contributed to this conference. We began with a keynote address by the Deputy National Security Advisor, Ambassador Vikram Misri, and we are grateful to you, sir, for your presence and your thought-provoking address. An interaction between our distinguished speakers and Dr. Sanjay Baru, the well-known scholar and journalist, was planned for yesterday. Unfortunately, he could not attend, but he shared his thoughts over video. We will share that video with all of you by email and on our website. Thank you, Dr. Baru. We are aware that a lot of effort was put in by the session chairs and the speakers, many of who traveled to Pune, especially for this event. We are indeed grateful to you for this. A very special vote of thanks to our very own General Shamsher Singh Mehta, who delivered the valedictory address, summing up the essence of the conference and giving us directions for the future. A round of applause to all our sessions, please. On behalf of the PIC, I wish to thank Shri Pradyot Haldar and Shri KM Singh, the leaders at the PPF, for their solid partnership with the PIC and for anchoring and conceptualizing this session on internal security. Likewise, our thanks to Air Marshal Bhushan Gokhale and all the members of CAS who are present here and who have been associated with this conference since inception. We are indeed grateful for the presence of the Southern Army Commander, Lieutenant General Ajay Kumar Singh, for your presence yesterday and today, sir. Thank you. I cannot fail to mention that enormous efforts were taken by the convener of this conference, Lieutenant General Vinayak Patankar, truly the architect of PDNS 2022. He held multiple meetings with the PDNS core group members, visited this venue a few times, communicated with all of you, and paid attention to the smallest of details. Thank you, General Patankar. A lot of thinking and rethinking happened within the PDNS core group, and for this we are grateful to all the members of the core group and to our President Dr. Mashelkar and Vice President Dr. Kelkar, under whose leadership PIC has been running for the last 12 years. Thank you to my entire team at the PIC office, our trusted associates, Pride Hotel, for helping us make this event a success. Lastly, I wish to thank all of you, dear participants, online and offline, for attending this conference and for taking the time out for this event. Before we close for the day, may I request all of you to please rise for the national anthem.
जनगण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मागे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
भारत माता की